All right, everybody. Welcome back. Bio Bros episode 12. We're coming back with a more informational episode this time. Got some notes and all that. We're going to get a little nerdy with it. And this is going to be intro to plants, basically. So, nothing too crazy, or specific. It's going to be just kind of an overview of plants in general, terms to know, and a little bit of like horticulture, so keeping the plants and all that in your home, around your house, all that kind of stuff, different methods of going about it. So me and Alex got into plants fairly recently, within the past couple years, but I'd say we got into plants a little differently. We got into plants like more on the science side of it rather than like houseplant side. Like we outgrew, not outgrew, it's kind of a bad word for it, but the Home Depot plants and stuff kind of were a very quick phase for us, and we got into, like, more specific things and learning about science and all that, and I figure we should share some of that because I think plants have a lot of just folklore around them and not as much real information about how they function and work.
Yeah, no, I completely agree because there was that surge in 2020, 2021, and not many people got into it behind the science or like this knowing the species and things like that. They just kind of got into it because it was a massive surge of plants. And I'm not saying that they don't like the plants and things like that, because I still feel like that actually brought a lot more people into the hobby who didn't even think about it before. But a lot of people who got into it through that just went with the trends or whatever. There's like the pink princesses and things like that, and they didn't understand like the species behind it and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it was almost a cultural boom more than a actual, like, plant boom.
Yeah.
So which is still cool, like, I'm a fan of what it did. I think it did a lot better for everybody. More people are into plants, which is always good. So I say we'll start at the very beginning because I think order of discovery and everything is important and neat. So the very first thing we're going to talk about is angiosperms and gymnosperms. Angiosperms are flowering plants. So fun facts about flowering plants, they're really, really new as far as evolution is considered. Sharks are older than them, like all kinds of stuff. There's crazy facts about how young flowering plants are. So the flowers are the reproductive parts of a plant. They will be able to create seeds with that. They're genetically diverse and everything. A gymnosperm has been around longer, and that is pretty much everything that makes cones for the most part. That's going to be fairly true. Remember, this is fairly basic. We'll get into the real nitty gritty in later episodes and stuff. We'll bring on guests for that. So, the cones you see on like a pine tree are essentially flowers. Now, they do function differently. It's not exactly the same thing, but that's how they reproduce. And they just kind of rely on wind. They don't rely on any sort of a pollinator or anything like that. They rely on luck. And that's kind of why you see dense forests and then nothing for a while because they can't really travel too far. They don't have that true like pollen that really is sticky and can transport and all that. They function a little differently. Now it's ultra basic. I know people some of the plant bros are gonna be mad at me for not going ultra into depth, but the goal is to get basic information out so you guys know how to talk about things that you will enjoy and you can keep everything together in a little better understanding. And then we'll dive deep into individual topics as time goes on.
Yeah, I mean, this the whole point is to start off, or so beginners can understand what we're saying, but also the people who enjoy these hobbies already can actually also get information that maybe they didn't know of before and things like that and learn more. So,
Right. And there's one more group of plants that well, technically two, but more groups of plants I want to talk about. Non-flowering plants that are not gymnosperms. Basically, think ferns. Ferns do not have flowers. They reproduce by spores, no flowers. They are vascular plants. A lot of people will say non-vascular for ferns, but they mean non-flowering. It's just a slip people do. They don't. We'll go into what vascular and non-vascular means exactly after this one. But that's the next group, bryophytes. Bryophytes are non-vascular plants. So these plants cannot move water nutrients around like up high, right? They don't have any xylem or phloem. Again, another things we'll get into in a second. So these are your so bryophytes are mosses, liverworts, and hornworts. Okay, those are the three you're looking for. So very, very small plants, and they just function off of osmosis and things like that to get, they just soak up stuff that's near them, right? You ever see moss far away from water? Not really. So those
Mm.
guys also reproduce via spores, and very interesting. We're not going to get into like how gametophytes and all that work. We will do a whole episode on that. That is a whole can of worms, but they don't flower. They're still plants. Now, what is the difference between the vascular and the non-vascular plants? Xylem and phloem. So xylem transports water and things that can be dissolved in water throughout the plant. And then phloem transports all of the sugars and proteins and things like that. So basically, think about it as your own circulatory system, right? We have veins and arteries that move things around in our body as well. Basically, like plants. Now, why is this a big advantage? It makes trees possible, right? Water can't just, what's the word I'm looking for? Wick. It can't just wick all the way up a 30-foot tree, right? It doesn't just do that. So they use the xylem and phloem to force water and nutrients against gravity to be able to feed those leaves at the top. It allows plants to get way, way bigger, and it's why we don't see huge mosses because they don't have that process. They just rely on wicking and just little physics tricks to get water. Xylem and phloem are also what you see in celery. When you break those, they have really big ones, so you can see it in real life. You ever done that experiment in class before where you set celery in the dyed water and you can see it go up it? That xylem and phloem working.
We did it. It wasn't a celery, but it was a white rose. You'd cut the white rose stem and then put it into the dyed water, and then the petals would change to the color.
Yeah, and that's a perfect transition into our next vocab word. I know we're firing through vocab, but that's fine. We'll get
Hmm.
into just discussion in 1 second here. Is flower versus inflorescence. Inflorescence is the entire structure, and normally it's groups of flowers. So some plants you'll see might look like they have one flower. Think about your like Monstera deliciosa. I know those Instagram reels, they make their rounds and people be like, "Oh, did you know you can actually eat Monstera deliciosa fruits?" So when you see those flowers on any aroids, every one of those little dots on there is an individual flower. The entire structure is an inflorescence. Some plants have single inflorescences, and that would just be a single flower. And then some have those big compound ones and all that. So generally, inflorescence, you'll hear people cut it down to inflow when they're texting. Just the entire structure.
Yeah, and the best example of like a probably the biggest inflow that I can think of would be Morphophallus titanum,
Yeah, it's
titanium or
titanium.
titanium. Yeah, titanium, which is also known as the corpse flower or uh, what is it, the corpse lily or things like that. But that is, if you look up pictures of that, it looks like an absolutely gigantic flower. But like Shaw just said, it's really when you look into the actual like stem, there's little dots, and those are all the individual flowers.
Yeah, so that's actually a really good point to bring up is a bit of a comparison. Coincidentally, both of these smell like death, but the Amorphophallus titanum is the largest inflorescence, but
Hmm.
it's not the largest flower. The
No,
largest flower is Rafflesia. So Rafflesia is the largest single flower. It looks like a traditional flower, just huge. Those plants are super cool too. They're parasitic. They don't actually make leaves. They're very weird and interesting plants. But they just make one huge flower that smells terrible. That big red one looks like meat almost. Really
it
weird.
looks like it's from Mario almost.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's very odd. But the Amorphophallus, largest inflorescence, small flowers. So another kind of interesting thing. Right. Now let's see. Infructescence. That's the next word we're looking for. Sorry, I had to look through my notes for a second. Infructescence is an inflorescence of fruit, basically. When you see like grapes, how all those fruits are connected together, that's an infructescence. Basically, a fancy word for fruit. You're not going to use that word too often unless you're into breeding aroids. Like our Anthurium friends talk about the infructescences frequently. Not a word that I use too often, and you won't use all that often, but it's a good one to know. Makes you sound cool when you toss it out there.
Yeah, that was one I didn't know before just now, to be honest. I've seen them say it before, and I've just been like, "Uh-huh," and nod my head because I don't know what they're saying half the time.
Yeah, it's that was one that I originally put together through context clues. Uh, all right, and the last thing I want to go over, because there's some confusion in this one, people use the words interchangeably, and they're not necessarily interchangeable, is corms, bulbs, and tubers. So bulbs, think of garlic, right? They have that kind of coating on them of like a papery kind of deal. They're flat on the bottom. It's called a basal plate, and roots and things will come out of that bottom part. Usually, bulbs have a pointed top at it. They look like garlic. Usually,
Mhm.
not all, but tulips are another example of a bulb. Corms. Now, the main thing I think of with corms, why they're different from tubers, which you'll hear people change those ones a lot, is corms get completely absorbed. So we're going to throw back to Amorphophallus. Amorphophallus, they make these big tubers, and then they use that entire tuber to make one giant leaf that looks like a tree. And if you were to dig that up, there would be no more tuber. Oh, not tuber, sorry. Wrong words. See, even I mix it up. No more corm under there while there's a leaf. And then after that leaf dies back and it goes dormant, the corm comes back. So every year you get a completely new corm on your Amorphophallus. Whereas a tuber is like a potato. So you can have a potato plant, the top part, and then there's still potatoes underneath. Those are like batteries. So they just kind of store some energy up in there. The plant can use them later, and the plant can also use them to reproduce and create clones of the mother plant using that. So you'll see people do that when it's like sweet potatoes. They'll grow them from this grocery store. It's kind of a fun little thing to do. But you can still have the top part of potato plant. And this is off topic, but it's kind of funny. So my name is Shaw, spelled Shaw, and in native Irish. I forget what that language is actually called. I'm quite sure it's a language. My name actually translates to the top part of the potato plant. So that's kind
Mhm.
of funny. Um, that was not what I was intended to be named after. It's just a funny translation thing with how languages work. But kind of fun. That's how I remember it.
I actually never knew that about Amorphophallus. I didn't realize that like the corm disappeared when they flowered, and then it just I thought the corm was there the whole time and just grew as they were uh f- leaved out. That's actually really cool. And
Yeah, no, the
another,
corms totally disappear. They're totally gone. You can uproot Amorphophallus while there's a leaf, and it'll just look like a
that's
normal plant.
that's crazy. Now,
Well, shallow root systems and stuff, but yeah,
yeah, they still
essentially
have the
normal plant.
roots, but it's just not the corm.
Mm.
So another example though for tubers uh would be, so I recently have been started growing some cranefly orchids, which, if you are growing cranefly orchids, which are a native plant to the southeast, um, so I don't recommend growing them indoors because they are actually a winter growing plant, or at least their leaves pop up in the winter, and they get one leaf per tuber. Um, Most of the time when you like see them online, like if you go and Google cranefly orchids for sale, those orchids more than likely are not seed grown. They are clones of an original plant. They've taken and cut tubers off to grow more of the original plant. Because um cranefly orchids, which like a lot of orchids, but these ones more specifically, need a very specific type of fungi to germinate their seeds, as well as a specific type of fungi for them to really thrive in the winter, because this is a plant that in about October, so right around now, they'll shoot out their leaf, and their leaf will stay out all winter long, all the way till about April. Then um, it'll photosynthesize and also take some energy from the fungi. And that's how they survive the winter, is taking the energy from the fungi while also photosynthesizing. And then in about April, their leaves die back, and they've stored up all this energy over the winter without having any of the trees and stuff above them in leaf, so they can get the most sun they possibly can. To then they store it all up so that in June and July they can shoot out a single flower spike, so they can be reproduced, or I guess so they can reproduce and be pollinated by moths, which I think is a really cool example of a tuberous species. But um, yeah,
Yeah, there's lots of tuberous plants people don't necessarily realize too, because a lot of the plants with corms are pretty seasonal, but
yes,
um, the the ones with tubers can be uh, like what is it, marantas and calatheas. No, not Anacletes, Marantas. Just Marantas. Sorry, they redid the whole prayer plant grouping of things very recently. They have tubers. I've actually eaten one of the tubers before just 'cause I want to see what it tasted like. Not good. Um, so
we
that's
do not
also
recommend you go and eat random tubers. That's a good way to
no,
get poisoned.
no, yeah, yeah. Look into what you're eating before you do it. Uh, and it wasn't good anyway, so I'm not gonna recommend it just on that. So now we'll get into horticulture a little bit about how to keep plants, how we do it, and general rules of how things work. So I think there's about probably 4 ways you can go about keeping plants. 1 is outside, 2 is inside, and then there's grow tents and greenhouses. And I think those are all distinctly different in how everything goes. So outside, I'm always gonna recommend keeping native species outside because there's no downsides to it at all. Everything is better, and it's ultra easy. So I know Alex keeps a lot of native stuff, so we'll let him talk about outdoor keeping a little bit.
Yeah, I actually this year have really gotten into the natives of North Carolina and just in general, because I just think they're so cool, and they're like, it's a unique niche because not a lot of people keep native plants. Um, Most of the time when you see all these like really nice landscape lawns and things like that, most of those plants are invasive or like from another country. Almost very rarely are they native plants. And native plants make it super easy with keeping outdoor plants, because once you have planted them, since they are naturally used to the environment that you live in, you maybe have to water them once or twice, for like maybe a couple of weeks just to get them established. And once they're established, you don't have to water them ever again. Unless you're having like a really bad drought or something like that. Obviously, there's extremes, but they they just are used to the environment, so you don't have to water them like you would these alien species as well. I've read studies showing that native plants, when it comes to supporting um, like caterpillars, or well, caterpillars are the best example that I have because it was actually the study I read it on. Um, they did study where they compared the ginkgo tree, which is a non-native tree, to native oaks and native maples, and the ginkgo tree can support about 5 species of caterpillar. And by support, they mean the caterpillar, butterflies can lay their eggs, leave them. The caterpillars then can hatch and eat all the leaves and grow all the way till they cocoon and turn into butterflies themselves. They can basically live out their whole life cycle in that tree. So 5 species for the ginkgo tree. versus native oaks and maples and things like that, it was over 500 species. So planting natives is not only kind of like a cool little niche that not a lot of people are in, it also very, very much so helps the environment, and helps your native species when it comes to frogs, when it comes to or like amphibians or insects, pollinators, all of that. They love natives, and natives help them or support them way, way better than alien species. Um, they also, a lot of people worry about like erosion and things like that in some of their houses and stuff. So like if there's a hill where it's eroding really bad, a lot of people will find some alien plant or they'll put like grasses down and things like that. When if you just plant like a native garden on that hill, native plants have root systems that go so deep. Some of them 10, 15 feet deep into the ground just because that's how they are, that they hold that um, surface, that whole hill in better than any of the non-native species really. Uh, and it helps prevent erosion and things like that.
I actually
And
have a good example I saw maybe I think it was today. I saw it. So, if you're watching this nearing when we recorded, the huge Hurricane Milton hit Florida and did tons of damage, and I saw a patch of mangrove trees, like, just totally destroying the storm surge. Like, the mangroves just put it right to a halt. It didn't move like, it was pretty impressive actually how much the mangroves were able to do that, and those are a native plant to the area, and so lots of things like that. Like, there's a reason things grow where they do, and they really tend to benefit us a lot. So we're always gonna recommend natives if you're keeping outside, especially in ground outside. In pots, things can get a little different, but natives are awesome. And we're mostly talking about ornamental plants too. This isn't necessarily starting up your tomato garden, just because that's we don't have experience with that really. Like, gardens are a whole different ballgame. Now we will move on to almost outside, but greenhouses. So greenhouses are exactly what you think. It's a big glass, sorry, glass or polycarbonate like building, and generally they get most of their light from the sun, and generally they stay warmer than the outside air, which is kind of cool. So you can keep tropical plants all year round. They're really cool because of the size. Greenhouses are so big that you can keep monstrous plants in them. Almost all the big nurseries who produce large quantities of plants are using greenhouses. People who grow large specimen plants, for the most part, they're using greenhouses. They tend to be a little more commercial, but there are people out there who keep just plants they enjoy in larger greenhouses outdoors.
oh yeah, no, greenhouses are actually really cool. They're also something that like this guy on YouTube or not YouTube on Instagram. Trying to remember what his tag is. I think it's A Life Exotic or A Exotic Life.
Yeah,
Um,
something along those lines.
he has a greenhouse. Uh, and it's insane because he set up a whole. Basically, he took a slice of the jungle and put it in this greenhouse. He has dart frogs in there. Um, A dot life dot exotic. That's what his handle is.
That guy's
Um,
actually in Utah too, so more impressive. Like it I mean, my whole family's from there. It's cold up there. There's significant amounts of snow, but he has it set up in a way that it's tropical all year round.
yeah, he is. I think it's geothermal heating in there. And like he has mist systems and stuff. So like he sunk thousands of dollars into this thing, but he's built essentially what you would see at like an aviary at a zoo, or like any
Yeah,
of the tropical buildings you walk into a zoo, and it's insane, and you can grow some insane things in there.
and that's definitely the advantage of greenhouses. You can get pretty much all the benefits of growing plants in ground, indoors. So super cool. But most people aren't going to keep greenhouses either. So what most people could do if they want to go a little more high tech here is a grow tent. I currently have a grow tent. I know you had a grow tent. You just decided to go a slightly different direction. And
Yeah.
super easy. The issues I have with grow tents is they're ugly. They're generally a big black box, and you open it up, and there's a basically one of those NASA blankets that look like tinfoil on the inside, ultra reflective. They're not very pretty, but you can really, really, really control the environment and grow all kinds of super cool plants. Like for me, I'm mainly interested in carnivorous plants, specifically Drosera and Nepenthes. For me, the only way I can really reasonably keep the plants I love is to have a controlled environment. So about half of my closet is taken up with a grow tent, and that's where I keep all my plants in. It allows me to keep high humidity, high light conditions without sacrificing an entire greenhouse that I don't have space for.
Yeah, I like Shaw said, I used to have a grow tent set up. Um, I personally am not a huge fan of them, just for me and how I like to keep plants. Um, they do very well. A lot of things do very well in there. It's just like Shaw said, they're big, they're bulky. It's just like a black box. Um, that as well as then, in my opinion, you when you set it up, you have to set it up very specifically so that you would actually be able to like enjoy your plants and like see them all the time and stuff, like look at them and like see all the different growth patterns and stuff like that. And then you're really limited to the amount and also the size of plants you can keep. Um, because you only have a limited space in that grow tent. And a lot of plants, if you've grown them in a grow tent, if you take them out, they will die back. I'm not saying they will die completely, but they normally will die back a fair bit because they are not used to the normal house humidity and temperatures and things like that. Um, so that's another reason I'm not a huge thing or a huge fan of grow tents is a lot of times if you've grown plant in there, if you want to keep that plant like that, you have to grow it in a grow tent.
Yeah, and like that's how my Nepenthes are. Even ones that could handle my temperature, like my Nepenthes ampullaria, temperatures are totally fine for that plant. The humidity is not. It's not gonna do well. It's not gonna like all its not gonna wanna hold as many traps as I want. It's gonna it's just not gonna work. I live in the desert. Nepenthes come from jungles in Asia. They're not it's just not gonna work. So it is really, really good for specialty plants if there's something that you're into. Totally get a grow tent. They're awesome for that. Pretty much all of our friends grow in grow tents, and they're a really good way to go if you want more specialized plants. If you want plants that just can't survive as a house plant, grow tent is the way to go. Unless you can get a whole
And
greenhouse, but that's unreasonable for pretty much everybody to have a greenhouse.
also if you have the space for a grow tent, because I tried to shove one into a small room and it just does not look good.
Yeah, I have half of a closet now.
Yeah.
So
So
I
you have to make sure
sacrificed
you
it.
have the space.
So the very last one, this is the one I actually have the least experience with because I live in the desert and the plants I like are not very happy about that, is just growing them in your house. The classic house plant. And that would just be keeping a plant in a pot by a window. That is
Yes.
another totally reasonable way to grow plants.
Which is what I mainly do. Um, most of my plants are either in a window, in a tank, or under a grow light. Um, and all of my personal plants that like I'm like really care about, don't want them getting messed up, want them to do well, they're in my room. The rest of the ones in the house, those are ones that I'm not as like worried about, and also I'm not like gonna freak out if they get damaged and stuff because we have dogs, we have cats. specifically the cats, because they like to destroy them. So, but it is, in my opinion, the best way to start indoor plants is just by, or like start getting into indoor plants is by doing it like this. Planting, having them in pots and on like in little water trays and things like that to catch the water when you water them and stuff. And then having them in windows or under grow lights in your house. Because it shows you how to care for the plants. You can still keep a ton of different species. I started making a list of all the species I have, and I haven't really gotten very far. But I probably have 30 plus species just in my room alone, and that's not even counting the tank plants. That's just counting all the plants that are in pots. And you can get a very wide variety that will thrive in your house. And some that even you might not even think that would thrive in your house. Like I have philodendron UPI, which a lot of people don't like to grow in not super high humidity, but mine's doing very well in the window. As well as I have an anthurium. It's red crystallinum X luxurians, which just means it's a hybrid of a red crystallinum and a luxurians, and it's doing very well in a window. Um, but I think it's the best way to get into plants indoors, as well as just learn how to care for them. Because you can start off with things like peace lilies or um, aloe plants or things like that, especially if you start off with like dramatic plants. And by dramatic plants, I mean like peace lilies. When they need water, they will flop over and look like they died. But then you water them and they come back and they're like, okay, we're cool.
Yeah, and pretty much everything you find at, like, a big box store's plant section, it'll do fine. Like, people tend to overreact of what can and can't be kept as a houseplant. Like,
Yes.
not long ago, Philodendron gloriosum was a grow 10 only plant as far as the internet was concerned, and now it's in every big box store because the large nurseries got a hold of it, and people are growing them just fine all over in all sorts of conditions. But, of course, you can get to some specialty plants where it is hard, but really, houseplants are pretty forgiving as long as you give them light. I feel like light is the thing that people neglect a lot. They think their house is brighter than it really is, and so they put them in the dark.
Yeah.
'Cause I've done that ton. My room is very dark, and I've tried to grow plants in here where I'm like, "No, it'll be good, it's by the window." No, it's not good.
Yeah, when they say low light plants, so like your peace lilies, your pothos, your snake plants, things like that, they mean they're low light tolerant. No plant is going to thrive in low light. Those low light plants just means that they will survive in low light, and they might take them a lot longer to die in low light. Um,
I mean, it's
because
like I say about, a lot of animals too. Like, I'll say, like, goldfish are really good at not dying. You can
yes.
keep a goldfish really poorly before it dies, but, like, a discus is really good at dying. It'll let you know real quick. Plants are the same way, they're also living things. Like a ZZ plant, that thing is hard to kill, or a lot of succulents,
Mhm.
very hard to kill. So, they might say they're low light, but it really means it's gonna take a few months to die.
I would argue against the succulents being hard to kill, is that's one thing that I will warn people about. Everyone says succulents are good beginner plants. They're liars.
Yeah. They
Succulents
look
are
good for a few
not
months,
good.
then you go over, they're dead.
Yes, because succulents, a few reasons, and I'm not going to go on a rant because I would. A few reasons succulents are not good beginners. They require super high light. They're very specific with their watering normally. At least a lot of species are. Like if you water too much, they rot and die. You water just a little too little, they dry up and die. Um, if they're not getting like almost direct sun most of the time, they're gonna die. They also show no signs of dying. You go from a perfectly healthy looking plant to a dead stick in 1 day. And they
I just
just
went through that like
yeah.
myself. I had some cactus outside and just like little like mammillaria and all that. And they were doing okay. And then the soil I have them in is not ideal. This is bad soil. Come out and it's just completely deflated.
Yep.
I'm like, oh, well, there it went.
And there's no saving it. um,
No, no, it was dead.
because like other plants that are good beginners, like Spathiphyllum, which is peace lilies, um, you like I said, they will look like they have died. You give it water, it's gonna come back. Uh, Succulents, they look like they've died. They've died. There is no saving them. They are a very. I would highly disagree that they are ever a beginner plant, mainly
Yeah.
for the reasons that I had just said.
Only place really I'd say they're beginner plants is outside where I live. They can do pretty good. They do pretty solid for the most part outdoors here.
Oh
But
yeah, they
I
do
also
well in
have
the
a
summers
favorable
here.
climate. So let's do a little bit of recap and then we'll catch up on anything we might have missed. So we had all those vocab words at the very beginning, right? We went over the differences between like plants that flower and don't flower very briefly. Xylem, phloem, vascular, non-vascular, right? So the xylem phloem is the difference between vascular and non-vascular. Inflorescence, the entire structure of the flower and everything. Flower is just the business end. Some things have, and then the bulbs are like garlic, tubers are like potatoes, and then the weird one, corms, are like amorphophallus. So I know that's not going to ring with a lot of people, but it's just weird enough. If you look it up, you'll remember it. Unless, Alex, do you have anything that comes out of a corm that's like a common food plant in America? Because actually, amorphophallus cognac is a common food plant over in Asia. If you ever see it's spelled Konjac. So you ever see like cognac noodles, or some people call them like miracle noodles because they have like no calories in them. Those are made out of the tubers of amorphophallus.
The
Or
only thing that I can think of that are, I'm pretty sure they're corms, would be the taro plant, and like it's a
oh
big
yeah,
thing in Hawaii.
yeah, those and people they're actually colocasia, right?
Yes, they're a type of colocation, I believe. So,
Yeah,
so I think
those
they're
purple
corm.
potatoes you see at the store sometimes. Like they're like weird and you cut them open, they're bright purple.
Yeah,
Yeah, those guys. I always
yeah,
forget about those.
they're very big in Hawaii. I know that.
Yeah, I know some Asian cultures use them a lot as well.
Yes.
So yeah, think about that for all the tubers, bulbs, corms, all that. Really not a huge deal if you interchange them, but it's good to know things. And then bryophytes are your non-vascular guys. They can't really move water and nutrients on their own. They're relying on outside sources to do that for them. And that is mosses, hornworts, and bladderwort. Not bladderwort. Bladderworts are utricularia. Hornworts, liverworts, and mosses.
Yes.
So, um, I do plan on doing more plant-based episodes. Just kind of wanted to get like a basics right out of the way, so that way we can get into more nerdy stuff and be like, look, go back to the other episode. We got some more basic stuff going on. Because I want to do one carnivorous plants in their entirety. Because I love carnivorous plants and I could talk about them all day. Definitely want to do carnivorous plants, and then I want to do like aroids specifically. Because those are the most popular, like for house plants and all that. I want to do a lot of different plant-based episodes that are more specific, but I feel like we need to do a general one too.
Oh yeah, no, I definitely agree, and we will do more episodes on plants, and we'll do more episodes on like specific things like the um ones you just listed, as well as I would like to do an episode on like Amorphophallus, uh, and then native species too, because I just think native species are really cool, and a lot of people
Yeah, that
don't like. It's a little niche group of people who actually grow natives as landscaping.
yeah, I think that one would be fun. Get like a 2 guests on from, like, different places around so everybody can talk about what's native to them and how it's different, and the
Hmm.
same. I think that'd be a fun one.
Yeah, it definitely would be.
So, yeah, if you guys made it this far and you want more plant episodes, drop what you wanna talk about with plants because we will do it. I've
Yeah,
got
and
a whole biology notebook full of, like, technical stuff, if that's what you're into, and we can talk about, like, individual, genera and all that.
yeah, and if y'all have any episodes that y'all wanting us to do, drop them in the comments. Give us some suggestions because we're always looking for new ideas, new things for different episodes and stuff. So if there's anything y'all would specifically like us to talk about and stuff, drop them in the comments. Let us know.
Yeah, and even if it's something we don't necessarily know about, we're both students, we both know how to find good resources and stuff. We'll do all the research and we'll condense it down for you so you don't have to.
Oh yeah,
So, Bio Bros, episode 12. That's that's like 3 months now worth of these. Uh, this is the plants basics of plants, I guess we'll call it.
yeah.
And see you guys on the next one. Have a good day.
Hey guys.